What if the most honest Vietnam War movies are the ones Hollywood stopped talking about? Everyone remembers Platoon, Apocalypse Now, and Full Metal Jacket. But dozens of smaller films captured the war from stranger, rougher, and sometimes more truthful angles. These 15 forgotten films deserve another mission, because military history fans may discover that the overlooked stories often reveal the most. Number 15. A Yank in Vietnam, 1964. Long before Hollywood felt comfortable looking directly at Vietnam, this drama entered the conflict while it was still unfolding. Marshall Thompson plays an American Marine pilot whose aircraft is brought down over the Vietnamese countryside. Cut off from friendly forces, he must move through jungle paths, villages, and uncertain alliances while trying to reach safety. Along the way, he meets a Vietnamese woman connected to the resistance, and a nationalist named Hong, forcing him to depend on people whose loyalties he cannot easily read. The film is simple, sometimes pulpy, and clearly made before later filmmakers developed the darker language of Vietnam cinema. Yet that is exactly why it matters. It captures an early American view of the war, when the conflict was still being presented as a dangerous foreign adventure rather than a national wound. The standout sequence comes after the crash, when the pilot realizes that surviving the landing was only the beginning. Every movement through the landscape can reveal a guide, a trap, or an armed patrol. What makes A Yank in Vietnam unusual is that it was filmed entirely in South Vietnam during the war. The locations give even its staged moments a texture that studio jungles could not copy. Military history fans should watch it less as a perfect combat film and more as a time capsule. It shows how Americans imagined Vietnam in the early advisory years, before escalation changed both the real war and the movies made about it. Number 14. The Last Hunter, 1980. Italian director Antonio Margheriti turned the Vietnam War into a jungle mission in The Last Hunter, one of the earliest European combat films set in that conflict. David Warbeck plays Captain Henry Morris, an exhausted American officer sent behind enemy lines to destroy a powerful radio transmitter. The station is broadcasting anti-war messages aimed at American troops, and the mission quickly becomes more complicated than a demolition job. Morris joins a mixed group that includes soldiers, a determined photographer, and men whose nerves are already fraying. Their route takes them through ruined positions, underground passages, and exposed river crossings. The film does not have the polish of a major Hollywood production, but its roughness gives it a sweaty, unstable feeling. Nobody looks protected by a heroic script. Its most memorable stretch takes place around the hidden broadcasting base. Morris finally reaches the target, but the discovery forces him to question who is speaking, why the messages are effective, and whether destroying one transmitter can change anything. The scene turns a military objective into a psychological confrontation. The enemy is not only firing from the jungle, it is also speaking directly to the doubts inside the soldiers. The Last Hunter can be excessive, and some moments belong to European action cinema more than strict history. Still, it reflects the confusion, fatigue, propaganda, and moral uncertainty that shaped the later years of the war. For viewers interested in how Vietnam was interpreted abroad, this Italian production is a revealing artifact. Number 13. The Iron Triangle, 1989. Most American Vietnam films ask viewers to follow American soldiers. The Iron Triangle takes a different route by dividing its attention between Captain Keane, an American officer, and Ho, a teenage Viet Cong fighter. The story was inspired by the diary of an unidentified Viet Cong soldier, and that foundation gives the movie a perspective rarely seen in late 80s war cinema. Keane is captured after a patrol goes wrong. Ho believes the American once had a chance to shoot him but chose not to, so he begins protecting his prisoner from harsher commanders. Their journey through enemy territory becomes the heart of the film. They do not suddenly become friends, and neither man forgets his uniform. Instead, they slowly recognize fear, duty, and exhaustion in each other. The strongest scene comes during their movement between camps. Keane has opportunities to escape, while Ho risks punishment by refusing to treat him as a simple object. Every pause feels dangerous, because compassion can be judged as betrayal by either side. The tension does not come from a huge battle. It comes from two soldiers deciding how much humanity they can show without losing control. The Iron Triangle is not flawless, but its willingness to give a Viet Cong character motives, family memories, and moral choices makes it especially important. Military history fans may also appreciate how it presents the war as a civil conflict fought by people with competing loyalties, not just a jungle contest between faceless forces. Number 12. Off Limits, 1988. Off Limits proves that a Vietnam War movie does not need to follow a patrol through the jungle. Set in Saigon during 1968, it follows Army criminal investigators Buck McGriff and Albaby Perkins, played by Willem Dafoe and Gregory Hines. They are ordered to investigate the death of a Vietnamese woman, to discover that the case may connect to a protected American officer and a pattern that powerful people want buried. The movie works like a police thriller inside a war zone. Streets are crowded, military vehicles push through civilian traffic, and every witness seems afraid of both the investigators and the command structure above them. McGriff and Perkins are armed, experienced, and officially authorized, yet they remain vulnerable because rank can close doors faster than evidence can open them. One of the film's best sequences comes when the two investigators chase a lead through the night streets of Saigon. The city feels alive but unstable, filled with music, checkpoints, bars, and sudden danger. The scene shows a side of the conflict often ignored by combat films: the war behind the front, where crime, corruption, military authority, and civilian survival collided. Off Limits is not a mystery, but its genre makes it valuable. It asks what justice means inside an institution focused on winning a war. Military history fans will find uniforms, procedures, and urban atmosphere, but the lesson is more troubling. Even far from the battlefield, the chain of command could become its own terrain. Number 11. Gardens of Stone, 1987. Francis Ford Coppola returned to Vietnam without showing the jungle at all. Gardens of Stone is set at Arlington National Cemetery, where the Army's Old Guard conducts funerals for those brought home from the war. James Caan plays Sergeant Clell Hazard, a veteran who understands combat but is assigned to ceremonial duty. D.B. Sweeney plays Jackie Willow, a young soldier eager to prove himself in Vietnam. The story is an argument between experience and ambition. Hazard tries to teach Jackie that courage is not the same as rushing toward danger. Jackie, however, sees the Old Guard as a place where soldiers march beside graves instead of making history. Their relationship deepens, but the audience knows that every funeral formation is a warning Jackie refuses to hear. The strongest scene is not a battle, it is one of the burial ceremonies. Boots strike the ground together. The flag is folded with precision. Rifles fire in salute. Families stand close enough to hear every command. Coppola uses military discipline to show grief that cannot be spoken. The ceremony looks beautiful, yet its beauty exists because another soldier has returned in a coffin. Gardens of Stone is slower than most war films, which may explain why it disappeared from conversation. But military history is not only about operations and weapons, it is also about institutions, ritual, casualty notification, and the people assigned to honor the dead. This overlooked drama studies the war through the graves it created at home. Number 10. The Hanoi Hilton, 1987. The Hanoi Hilton focuses on American prisoners held at Hoa Lo Prison in North Vietnam from the mid-1960s into the early 70s. Rather than build the story around one real prisoner, the film uses fictional composite characters to represent experience. Michael Moriarty plays Patrick Williamson, a pilot who is captured after his aircraft goes down and learns that the rules he expects will not protect him. Inside the prison, survival depends on discipline, communication, and the refusal to let isolation destroy the group. Prisoners tap messages through walls, pass information in whispers, and create a command structure. The guards use pressure, propaganda, and separation to weaken them. The film moves across years, showing how men change as hope rises and falls with news from outside. Its most memorable scenes involve the prisoners communicating through coded taps. There is little movement, no aircraft, and no battlefield, yet the tension is intense. A few sounds through concrete tell a man that he is not alone. That small connection becomes an act of resistance and a way to preserve military order when uniforms, weapons, and freedom have been taken away. The Hanoi Hilton received limited attention when it arrived, partly because other Vietnam films were dominating the decade. Its style is direct and sometimes heavy, but its subject matters. Military history fans interested in prisoner leadership, morale, and endurance will find a film that treats captivity as a different kind of campaign, fought through patience, memory, and control. Number 9. Flight of the Intruder, 1991. Flight of the Intruder enters the Vietnam Air War from the cockpit of the Navy's A-6 attack aircraft. Brad Johnson plays Lieutenant Jake Grafton, a pilot angered by missions against targets that seem militarily useless. After his bombardier is lost during a low-level return flight, Jake begins questioning a system that asks crews to risk everything while avoiding targets that might weaken the enemy. He finds a partner in Virgil Cole, played by Willem Dafoe, an experienced bombardier with his hard view of the war. Together, they plan an unauthorized strike near Hanoi. Their commanding officer, Frank Camporelli, played by Danny Glover, understands their frustration, but also knows that discipline is what keeps an air wing alive. The film's signature scene is the illegal night mission. The intruder moves low through darkness as radar warnings, anti-aircraft fire, navigation calls, and cockpit lights create pressure. Unlike fast fighter movies, this sequence emphasizes teamwork between pilot and bombardier. The aircraft is not built for glamorous aerial duels. It carries heavy ordnance deep into defended territory and depends on precise navigation. The movie takes liberties and sometimes favors bold action over careful politics, but aviation fans will appreciate its focus on carrier operations, mission planning, and the emotional cost of restrictive target lists. Beneath the explosions is a serious question. What happens when skilled officers believe the strategy above them is wasting lives? Flight of the Intruder turns that frustration into a tense, overlooked air war drama. Number 8. Bat-21, 1988. Based on a real rescue operation, Bat-21 follows Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Isael Hambleton, played by Gene Hackman, after his electronic warfare aircraft is struck by a surface-to-air missile. He ejects behind enemy lines as the crew's only survivor. Because Hambleton possesses sensitive knowledge, recovering him becomes urgent, but the area is filled with enemy forces preparing for an offensive. Danny Glover plays forward air controller Bartholomew Clark, known as Bird Dog, who becomes Hambleton's voice in the sky. The two men communicate by radio while rescue plans fail. Hambleton is not a young infantryman. He is an older specialist forced to crawl, hide, read terrain, and survive with limited field experience. The film's best idea appears when Hambleton uses golf courses as a coded map. He describes familiar holes and distances so Clark can guide him towards safer ground without revealing the route over the radio. The sequence turns memory into military navigation. A peaceful game from home becomes a survival language inside a hostile landscape. Bat-21 compresses and changes parts of the historical rescue, so it should not be treated as a complete record. Still, it offers a gripping look at electronic warfare, forward air control, search and rescue, and the danger created when a downed specialist carries information. Hackman and Glover keep the story human. Their characters are separated by distance, yet the radio connection makes the rescue feel like a two-man patrol through the sky and jungle. Number 7. The Odd Angry Shot, 1979. American movies dominate the public image of Vietnam, but Australia fought there too, and The Odd Angry Shot gives Australian soldiers a voice. The film follows Bill, a young recruit joining a Special Air Service patrol for a year in Vietnam. His companions include the older, cynical Harry, and a group of men who survive through jokes, beer, arguments, and professional routine. Much of the story is about waiting. The soldiers deal with rain, mud, poor food, skin infections, letters from home, and the boredom of preparing for danger that may not arrive. Then mortar fire or a jungle contact suddenly changes everything. This rhythm is one of the film's strengths, because combat does not appear as a continuous adventure. It interrupts ordinary life without warning. A famous scene begins as the men joke inside their camp, before incoming rounds tear through the routine. The shift is immediate. Humor disappears, training takes over, and the audience understands why the soldiers use comedy whenever they can. Another powerful moment comes near the end, when survivors return to Australia and hesitate to admit where they have been. The odd, angry shot avoids grand speeches about victory. Instead, it studies mateship, fatigue, and the emotional distance between veterans and civilians. Its Australian slang may feel unfamiliar, but the military behavior is recognizable. Men complain, tease one another, follow drills, and carry losses quietly. For history fans, it opens a national perspective that American-centered Vietnam lists too often ignore. Number 6. The Siege of Firebase Gloria, 1989. The Siege of Firebase Gloria is a compact defense film set during the Tet Offensive. R. Lee Ermey plays Sergeant Major Bill Hafner, who leads a Marine reconnaissance patrol into a poorly prepared firebase. The local commander is unable to control the position, morale is collapsing, and an attack appears close. Hafner takes charge, strengthens the defenses, and forces the exhausted garrison to prepare. Wings Hauser plays Corporal Joseph DeNardo, Hafner's loyal second-in-command. Their friendship gives the movie weight beneath the action. The soldiers dig, place fields of fire, organize ammunition, and wait through the silence before each assault. On the other side, the film also follows a Vietnamese commander, giving the battle a sense of planning, rather than presenting the attackers as a mindless wave. The final defense is the reason viewers remember it. Attacks strike the wire, positions fall, wounded men are moved, and Hafner runs from point to point, trying to hold the perimeter together. The geography remains clear, so the audience understands which bunker matters and why each lost section increases the danger. The movie is fictional and should not be mistaken for a reconstruction of one specific firebase battle. However, it dramatizes defensive preparation, leadership failure, small unit cohesion, and the overwhelming pressure of Tet. Ermey also brought his Marine experience to the production and helped shape additional material. For military history fans, Firebase Gloria is blunt, tense, and far better organized than its forgotten reputation suggests. Number 5. The Boys in Company C, 1978. The Boys in Company C begins before Vietnam, with 5 recruits arriving at Marine Boot Camp in 1967. There is an aspiring writer, a streetwise hustler, a quiet man, a protester, and Tyrone Washington, whose confidence turns him into a leader. Their drill instructors transform them into Marines, and one of those instructors is played by R. Lee Ermey in his first screen role. Once the men reach Vietnam, the film changes from training drama to angry satire. They discover officers obsessed with statistics, missions designed around personal convenience, and supplies treated as more valuable than lives. The recruits who seemed unprepared show better judgment than the people giving orders. The movie's most famous sequence is a soccer game against a South Vietnamese team. Company C is pressured to lose because commanders believe a victory will improve relations. The Marines are promised safer duty if they cooperate, but their pride takes over. As the match grows intense, the war crashes into the game, turning a ridiculous order into tragedy. The Boys in Company C arrived before celebrated Vietnam movies and contains ideas later audiences would recognize in Full Metal Jacket, especially its move from boot camp to battlefield confusion. Its tone shifts sharply, but that instability fits a story about young men trapped between military discipline and official nonsense. Military history fans should notice how the film attacks the body count mentality and the distance between headquarters logic and the experience of Marines. Number 4. Go Tell the Spartans, 1978. Go Tell the Spartans examines the advisory phase of the war, before American formations dominated the headlines. Burt Lancaster plays Major Asa Barker, a tired officer stationed in South Vietnam in 1964. He is ordered to occupy Mukwa, an abandoned village where French soldiers were defeated during the Indochina conflict. The mission looks minor, but the location carries a warning: nobody above Barker wants to understand. Barker sends a mixed group of American advisors, South Vietnamese troops, and local fighters to hold the position. The unit is short on manpower, intelligence, and reliable support. As enemy pressure grows, Barker requests reinforcements and receives excuses. Political concerns in Saigon matter more than the soldiers at Mukwa. The film's defining scene occurs when the men discover the French cemetery and its inscription referring to the Spartans who fell at Thermopylae. The message is clear: another foreign army is standing on the same ground, making the same assumptions, and preparing to suffer the same result. Lancaster plays Barker as a professional who sees the disaster coming but remains trapped inside his duty. Unlike larger Vietnam epics, Go Tell the Spartans is built around weary conversations, bad intelligence, and a position that never deserved so many lives. Its combat scenes are effective because the strategic failure is visible. Military history fans will appreciate the focus on advisors, local forces, and the dangerous belief that American resources could solve problems the French had already failed to solve. Number 3. Dear America, Letters Home from Vietnam, 1987. Dear America is built from real letters written by soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, nurses, and others who experienced the war. Actors including Robert De Niro, Martin Sheen, Willem Dafoe, Robin Williams, and Kathleen Turner read the words, but the voices never become the focus. The letters remain personal, uncertain, funny, frightened, and ordinary. The film combines those letters with news footage, Defense Department material, photographs, and home movies made by service members. Instead of following one unit, it moves through the emotional stages of the war. Early letters describe excitement and confidence. Later ones speak about exhaustion, confusion, friends who are gone, and the desire to return home. One unforgettable sequence matches a young man's letter with images of him in Vietnam, then reveals what happened to him. The effect is powerful because the film does not need a narrator to explain the tragedy. The distance between what the writer believed and what the audience learns says everything. Dear America is essential for military history fans because it preserves the language people used before memory reshaped their stories. These are not polished interviews recorded decades later. They are messages sent while events were still happening. Equipment, operations, and politics appear, but always through personal experience. The documentary reminds us that every arrow on a campaign map represented individuals writing to parents, partners, children, and friends. Forgotten beside larger theatrical films, Dear America may be one of the clearest emotional records of the Vietnam generation. Number 2. The Anderson Platoon, 1967. French filmmaker Pierre Schoendorfer returned to Vietnam after covering the French Indochina War and embedded with a 33-man platoon of the United States Army's 1st Cavalry Division. The unit was led by Lieutenant Joseph Anderson, a West Point graduate. Instead of building an argument through interviews with politicians, Schoendorfer follows the platoon through operations, rest, helicopter movements, patrols, and loss. The soldiers speak casually to the camera. They listen to music, joke, clean equipment, and wait. Then the film moves with them into villages and fields, where uncertainty replaces conversation. Because the cameraman is present, every image has the tension of something that could change without warning. A famous sequence uses Nancy Sinatra's "These Boots Are Made for Walkin'," while the men prepare and move through their routine. The pop song creates a connection between American youth culture and the machinery of war. Stanley Kubrick later echoed that musical choice in Full Metal Jacket. Another moment records the platoon reacting after a soldier is lost, showing grief without the dramatic shape of fiction. The Anderson Platoon won the Academy Award for Documentary Feature, yet it is rarely placed beside better-known Vietnam films today. That neglect is surprising. It captures helicopter warfare, racial integration, young leadership, boredom, and fear while the war was still happening. Military history fans should see it as both a document and a warning. The camera does not arrive after memory. It stands beside the soldiers while memory is being created. Number 184. Charlie Mopic, 1989. Before found footage became common, 84 Charlie Mopic used it to place viewers inside a Vietnam reconnaissance patrol. The title comes from the military code for a cameraman. In the film, an Army cameraman joins a long-range patrol with a public affairs lieutenant. Everything we see is presented as material recorded during their mission. The patrol is led by Sergeant O.D., a hardened professional who understands that the lieutenant has rank but little field knowledge. The team moves into enemy territory, avoiding traps, observing troop movement, and calling for fire support. At first, the cameraman records jokes and interviews. Gradually, the footage becomes evidence of a mission breaking apart. The strongest scene involves a wounded team member trapped in the open, while an enemy marksman uses him to draw out the others. The camera cannot help. It can only watch as Sergeant O.D. makes a terrible decision. Later, when the patrol races toward extraction, the viewpoint itself becomes part of the real danger. The audience remembers that somebody must survive for the film to exist. Writer and director Patrick Sheen Duncan served in Vietnam, and his approach gives the movie unusual credibility. There are no grand speeches, famous stars, or safe cutaways to headquarters. The patrol's knowledge is limited, so ours is too. For military history fans, this is the forgotten masterpiece of small unit tension, fieldcraft, leadership, and fear. It does not show Vietnam from above. It makes the camera walk. Which of these forgotten Vietnam War movies deserves to be rediscovered first? These films may lack the fame of Hollywood's biggest classics, but they explore advisors, prisoners, investigators, pilots, allied troops, and ordinary patrols with rare focus. More importantly, they show that no single movie can explain such a complicated conflict. Tell us which title surprised you most, and which overlooked war film should join the list. Subscribe for more forgotten military movies, hidden history, and stories cinema left behind.